And then for agenda item B, citizen input regarding Code Next. The first speaker is Ryan Nill, and Mr. Nill, you have 3 minutes.
Don't you have a standby, whoever's secretary?
Oh, yes, that is a great idea. And Liza Wimberly is second. You're on deck.
Sit down and talk.
If you're Ryan Nill.
I am Ryan Nill. Sorry, I didn't hear the break when I ran from the lobby.
Okay. And you will have 3 minutes.
Okay, I have some documents to pass out. Should I do that now or at the end?
Yes, please.
Okay.
The time needs to click. We're not going to have enough time.
Oh, no.
A few more. How many folks are there here right now? 25? Okay.
About 25.
Let me get them all. All right. Actually, can I keep one for your reference? Thank you.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, please.
Sorry. Hello, my name's Ryan Nill. I'm a resident of the Wooten neighborhood, and I'm also a member of the La Reunion Cooperative Apartments. I'd like to speak about Code Next and how it affects cooperative housing. I guess for reference for folks that don't know about cooperative housing, it's a form of community, democratically managed housing where the tenants essentially take on many of the responsibilities of the landlords and are able to save a lot of costs by doing so. And I've handed out a document that shows the costs of local cooperatives compared to rents, local rents in that area, and we see cost discounts of 40 to 60% for cooperatives. So I think this is a really important affordability solution. Most of the co-ops in town are of what has been called missing middle housing. They're typically small apartments. I live in a courtyard apartment with 20 units. Many of the co-ops are, 5 to 15 bedroom, like large houses from large extended families from the past. So we really want to make sure that co-ops are represented and able to access any new and existing missing middle housing. But one of the problems that we've had is that we've got a co-op definition in the code. It was in the last draft of the code, it's in the current draft of the code, but the definition does not actually suit the needs of any of the cooperatives in town. So I'd really like to see some of that definition changed to suit the needs. And I'm still working on a good definition. We've got some good feedback that I'm considering. But additionally, the CAG made a recommendation. Let me pull out some notes real quick about what can be done with cooperatives. And the CAG recommendation was to revise the definition, to change the occupancy limit to 2 persons per bedroom instead of whatever the standard occupancy limit is, and to add a new cottage court type that has a large house and separate duplexes or cottage houses on either side to allow for more co-housing style arrangements, and also to reconsider parking limits for cooperatives. I think this is a use that's gotten a lot of traction lately. The council actually passed a housing co-op resolution on August 17th, and that resolution says that we should allow co-ops to access affordable housing dollars, to reduce hurdles to co-op development by making code amendments, which we are in the process of doing, and to explore converting frequent code offending properties to co-ops because, the tenants are being abused and they should have a right to take over from negligent landlords. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Liza Wimberly is next, and Kevin McLaughlin is on deck.
Chair Kobasa,
Yes.
if I can make a quick comment. I'd like, if we could, as opposed to clapping after each person talks, which we may get plenty of that tonight, if we could get just at Planning Commission, we wave our hands up in the air. It allows the conversation to continue uninterrupted. We
Right.
see how much you love the person and what they said, and the flow continues, because it'll be a long night.
Okay, thank you. We're not used to clapping at ZAP meetings.
What do you guys do instead?
Okay, thank you, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Lisa Wimberly, and I live in Rosedale. My family moved to Austin over 20 years ago. We were fortunate enough to buy a house in Rosedale back in '96 when it was still affordable. I say fortunate because Rosedale is a fantastic urban core neighborhood. It's only 5 miles from downtown, which is only a 30-minute bike ride. Our walk score is in the 90s. We have a library. We have tons of restaurants, grocery stores, and other amenities within walking, biking distance. And the nearest bus stop is less than a half a mile away. Living in an urban core neighborhood has allowed me and my husband to raise our 2 kids with 1 car. We've only owned 1 car at a time for over 20 years. Our proximity to the center of Austin allowed my husband and me to commute to work by bike or by bus. And we routinely have days when our car doesn't leave the driveway. The same is true for many other urban core neighborhoods. Many afford the same opportunities for mode shift that Rosedale does, but many, if not most, of these neighborhoods are currently zoned like they are car-dependent suburbs. My house, for instance, is zoned SF2. And with the Code Next Draft 2 proposal, it will be marginally better at an R2A. So while our elected officials talk about closing coal power plants and installing solar panels and building more energy-efficient houses, which are all admirable goals, they often choose to ignore one of the major contributors to climate change, personal vehicles. So my question to you and everyone involved in this process, what better way is there to reduce personal car usage than allowing many more people to live like my family does, and many other families do in Austin's urban core? Car light or even car free. Having the opportunity to commute to work by bike or bus, walking to nearby destinations. We were lucky to afford our house to have this lifestyle, but most of urban core is unaffordable to young singles and families. We need more types of housing that allow people to share the cost of expensive central Austin dirt. We need housing like fourplexes, small apartments, row houses, cottages, ADUs in the urban core where we can make the most positive impact on our environment. Many young people today want to live car-free. My son, who's almost 25, and many of his friends don't own cars. Some never got their driver's license. If we're serious about helping our environment, we need to make it possible for these young people to live in neighborhoods that give them the best opportunity for car-free life. We need to build more urban core housing for the next generation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Kevin McLaughlin is next, and on deck is Nina Rinaldi. And Mr. McLaughlin, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kevin McLaughlin.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm Kevin McLaughlin, and I'm a resident of Austin. When I moved to Austin in 2007 to attend UT, the Frost Tower was still the tallest building in the city. After graduating, my wife and I had to move away to find work. But after that, Austin grew enough that we were able to get good jobs and come back. Now we live at 38th and Guadalupe. I work at a startup downtown, and my wife works for Seton, just a few blocks from our apartment. And soon, we plan on starting a family. Needless to say, we're very fortunate. But unless Austin can build more housing, as fortunate as we've been, we won't be able to have that family and stay in Austin. And we really do want to stay in Austin. We want to raise our children here because we want them to grow up in a flourishing and vibrant city. We want to walk with them and to see new and exciting things with them. To stay in Austin, we don't need a 6-bedroom mansion. We'd be elated to have a condo or to share a duplex. But right now, Austin's code doesn't let us build enough of those. That's why I support a code next that lives up to the vision of Imagine Austin. People in this city should have the freedom to build the housing they need so that everyone who wants to live in Austin can afford to live in Austin. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Nina Rinaldi, you're up next, and Hosea Stevenson, you're on deck.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Nina Rinaldi, and I'm a renter in the Brentwood neighborhood of Austin. You'll have to bear with me. I'm a little sick today. This spring, I started going to District 7 meetings about Code Next, and I noticed that there were basically no other people around my age or other people who were renters who showed up at the District 7 events to get involved in this process. I'm here today because I want to make sure that renters are represented in this conversation, and I'd like to highlight that moving forward, the needs of Austin's renters will be best served by a code that allows multifamily and missing middle housing in every single one of our neighborhoods. I'm lucky to live in an older apartment complex in Brentwood. It's probably from the 60s or 70s. There are a lot of big new apartment buildings in my neighborhood as well, and their units are a lot more expensive than the one that I'm living in. I can't afford to live there, but if those newer apartments didn't exist, the apartments at my complex would be a lot more expensive than they already are. This is because I would be competing with the same pool of people for a more limited stock of housing. My apartments aren't staying relatively affordable in a vacuum. They're staying relatively affordable because they exist alongside these newer, fancier options that wealthier renters are willing to pay more for. If we construct more housing in Austin today, in the years to come, those new units will age into being the more affordable options. We need to legalize the construction of smaller, denser housing units within Central Austin, rather than just trying to hang on to the limited housing stock that we do have. 56% of Austinites rent rather than own, so if we're not doing what's best for renters, we're definitely not doing what's best for the majority of Austinites. Our new code should provide a path to constructing multifamily and missing middle housing in every neighborhood in our city, particularly throughout the areas of West and Central Austin that are now accessible only to Austin's wealthiest residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Hosea Stevenson, and on deck is Natasha Madison.
Hi, my name is Josiah Stevenson. So the most important thing about Code Next, the core of its mandate, according to Imagine Austin, is to rewrite the code in a way that gets us a compact and connected city. So as the Land Use Commissions, as you both review the code in the coming months, the most important question that you need to be asking about the code as you weigh it, as you evaluate it, is does this code make Austin compact and connected? That's the mandate. That's what we're supposed to be evaluating it on. There are lots of reasons to want a compact and connected city. So it'll be more affordable, more livable, more convenient, more fiscally sustainable from an infrastructure perspective, and most importantly, more environmentally friendly. Compact and connected cities put less carbon dioxide into our atmosphere and contribute less to climate change. And so if we're serious about protecting our environment, we need to become a city that drives less because its people live closer to the places that they need to go. But there's another way that compactness impacts our environment. And that's what I want to spend most of my time talking about today, and that's stormwater runoff. So to both improve water quality in our city, in our creeks, and our rivers, and to properly mitigate and manage flood risk, we need a code that we need to minimize the amount of impervious cover in our watersheds and in our metro area. And so we need a code that does that at the metro area level minimizes the amount of impervious cover minimizes the amount of ground that we're covering with impervious surfaces, whether that's parking lots or buildings. Unfortunately, according to the EPA, the approaches to this that we and many other cities have taken so far are penny wise and pound foolish. So lot level, percentage-based rules based on just like the zone intensity or whatever, the 45% that we have in a lot of the residential zones. What that does is it encourages tens of thousands of acres of low-density sprawl on the periphery of the city. What that does is that ends up covering more ground per person than if we allowed, fourplexes to cover, 60% of the lot, or if we stacked more people a little bit higher. We can't control the number of people. Almost nothing that we can do in this room or even at City Council is really going to affect the number of people moving to the metro area. What we can do is use our space more wisely and be better stewards of our environment and our watershed in where those people are going to go, right? So we need to reform our zoning in ways that do that.
Thank you very much. And Natasha Madison, you are next, and then Mary Engel is on deck.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Natasha Madison. I was born in Austin, Texas in 1977 at the old Brackenridge Hospital. I'm here for enough reasons that I'll say many reasons, and it's to represent people who are not here today. Maybe take a look around the room and see what you see. Some of these things don't look like the others. And I'm here to say that, it's kind of funny, but also because I want everybody to start to take into consideration that this is not my level of subject matter expertise. I've had to Google my way through ABCD code 3705, and the terminology is not familiar. The concepts aren't necessarily familiar, but I see the effects, in which case I'm a concerned citizen. I'm an advocate for the citizens in Central East Austin who need advocacy with mitigating the most basic need shortages: housing, food, transportation, access to health care. And so I'm learning alongside my clients what all this actually means. And so anecdotally, I'd like to tell you a story about how my dad was a barefoot bluegrass musician in Arkansas in the 60s with a giant afro, and that didn't fly. So he and my mother found solace in Austin, Texas, where it welcomed wacky artists and intellectuals who wanted to live a life that seemed ideal in rural Arkansas but could be possible in Austin, Texas. And they bought this beautiful little pier and beam, 800 square feet, piece of junk bungalow, but it was theirs. And the yard looks exactly the same today. The house looks exactly the same today. But that house that my pop spent $41,000 on just sold for $485,000. It's still 800 square foot, and it's still the singular house on this lot. So what I'm learning about density, about these concepts that I wasn't familiar with before, is there are 4 families that could live on that lot. Now, one, I won't call them greedy, but I will say, because of how it exists today, people are allowed to waste land. I worked for very wealthy people for a long time, and I got to watch them live in 13, 14, 15,000 square foot houses, and they really only occupied maybe 1,200 square foot of the house. It was just a waste, so wasteful. And the person in me who's concerned about sustainability is dialing into this argument and this conversation. The person who advocates for folks in Central East Austin is dialing into this conversation. And I keep Googling my way through the terminology, but it sure would be great if more people who don't look like the others had access to this conversation because it wasn't so technical. Every room I go to, I'm either the only person who looks like me or one of 2 or 3. And so I can go back and disseminate the information all I want, but if I'm learning at the same time they are, I'm not really a reliable source. So maybe we could make it more accessible in general. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mary Engel is next, and Daniel Keshet is on deck.
Good evening, brave souls on this board, or these boards. I want to talk about 3 things: derivation tables, ADUs, and lack of best practices. Deciphering the changes between Draft 1 and Draft 2 have been time-consuming and irritating. Where are the derivation tables and the summaries? Even the old code has derivation tables that are updated yearly. Please, there is a need for derivation tables because the public and the staff can track the code more easily, and this might even cut down with mistakes. This Draft 2 is less than perfect. Now I want to talk about ADUs. This is just one minor example of how screwed up this code is. What is the real square footage of an ADU? 1,100 square feet or 1,150 square feet? There are contradictions in the tables in the text. So, which is it? We need to know, because this is where loopholes are created. Furthermore, it doesn't make any sense why an ADU isn't based on best practices, the square footage of it. A good code writing team would research best practices. I found a study that referenced Santa Cruz, Portland, Denver. The square footages range from 500 square feet to 800 square feet. Our current code has 850 square feet in it, and we are close now to the national average. So Draft 2 is proposing much more than the best practices in the country. Now I'm going to go into the weeds with criticisms about ambiguous language I found in the ADU section. One, and I can give you the citing, 6050, 23-4E-6050, gives too much discretion to the director to determine that a use is necessary, customary, appropriate, incidental, and subordinate. These are ambiguous terms which create and contribute to confusion. There is also no definition of these terms in the code. These are not legal terms. The first draft included also a restrictive covenant for a property owner to sign about residency with an ADU. This has been omitted in the second draft. It might help with code enforcement. Is that so bad? Bring it back. The impervious cover limits, building coverage, etc. were not listed in this section in the second draft as they were in the first draft. It is always helpful to have limits clearly listed in one place so the public and the staff can reference those easily. Simplify the code. Remember that phrase? Again, this is one minor example of a topic that got screwy. We should cut our losses and stop this process. Tie up the city planning staff so they can't do any more damage, and I'm sorry to be flippant. Let's get our money back. This is a big mess, and I'm angry about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Daniel Keshet, and Frank Herron is on deck.
Hi, my name is Dan Keshet. I am a downtown resident, and I'm here today to talk about parking requirements, especially downtown. As some of you might know, currently downtown does not have parking requirements beyond ADA accessible spaces. Not in the Code Next draft, but in Austin's current code. I do not see anything in the Code Next draft that keeps this status quo. In fact, what I see is that the downtown, I could be, if I'm wrong, then I would love assurance that I would love to have it written out in assurance that they have been eliminated. I know that this is going to pose an enormous problem to downtown. This is going to be a major, major disruptor to add the parking requirements that we see. In the last 5 years or so, there's just been a seismic shift in the way that people in staying in hotels use parking spaces. People come to Austin. We advertise Austin as a place that you can come, stay downtown, and never need to rent a car. This is how people are getting around. They're walking around downtown. They're using Uber and Lyft. They're using, they're using cabs. We had a hotel go up, the Aloft Hotel on Congress Avenue, I think at about 7th Street. That's, I don't want to get it wrong, but it's at least hundreds of units, and it has all of its parking space is valet. It's all using existing parking space. They did not add they did not add any parking. And the reason why we can do this is downtown is already way overparked. The Downtown Austin Association did a study and found that the biggest problem with parking, with people finding parking downtown, was not a lack of spaces, but the fact that we built so much parking into every building that it's not accessible. Most people in coming downtown are used to the idea that you might park in one building and go access your use in another building. And we already have the parking to accommodate way more activity downtown than we have existing today. I think that this is a big step backward, and I'm speaking about downtown, but I think that it should give us pause about the parking requirements that we have for other regional activity centers, because these shifts happened fast. The new hotels that we have, the JW Marriott, the Fairmont, the Aloft, none of these are parked to the 1-to-1 ratio that I see in the regional activity centers. There's no reason why the same thing could not happen at the Domain, where lots of people are coming to park for business purposes, for things that are on site to the Domain. So thank you.
Thank you. And then next up is Frank Herron, and our last public speaker is Kaz, and he'll have to say his last name. Thanks.
Good evening. Let me say first that my opinion of staff and the consultants is quite different than the one you heard a few minutes ago. In my experience, they've been honest, competent, smart, and just nice people all around. That said, I want to talk about affordability because I think that team is being sent the wrong message. Affordability requires density. I've got a list of all the new zoning districts here and a calculation of how many square miles have been mapped in each of those districts. If you add all of the mixed use, the residential house scale, the residential multi-unit, and the Main Street, which I think is all the areas that you can expect housing, it adds up to about 97 square miles, which sounds to me about right. It's about what we've got now. Problem becomes more than 2/3 of that area, you can only put 1, 2, or 3 units on a lot. Further, 90% of that area, you can only put 1 or 2 units on a lot. And that's what we had in 1931. We have got to embrace the densification of our neighborhoods or we will never solve affordability. Y'all have heard me talk about Terry Mitchell a number of times. He is undoubtedly, by consensus, one of our foremost local experts. And he makes the statement without exception that if we don't have density, we don't stand a chance to get affordability. That's his only major tool. And he's built 23,000 plus units in this town. If we don't embrace the fact that our neighborhoods must, over time, change in terms of densification, we will never solve the problem. That's just a fact. And it's about time we got used to that. I have begun, as some of you know, going around to our existing neighborhoods, looking at those small areas where we have put density into our neighborhoods. And in every case, they are surrounded by people who chose deliberately to buy single-family homes directly across the street or next door. The density does not ruin neighborhoods. And I've found examples already in Terrytown, in Hyde Park, in Clarksville. You can go look at them for yourself. Those are lovely neighborhoods with all that mixed in, the density mixed in with the single family. We have got to tell our staff and our consultants, and 4 council members made a public statement a couple of weeks ago that they're not going to vote for a code until it meaningfully addresses affordability and equity. And we're not headed that direction. It's not the consultant's fault. It's not your staff's fault. We need to deal with the reality that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herron. And our last speaker is Kaz Wotiwis. And as a person with a Polish last name, I apologize for messing up yours.
Wojtewicz.
Wojtewicz. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Kaz Wojtewicz. First, I want to thank the commissioners for allowing us to speak on this Very important topic tonight. Austin is in the midst of a deep housing crisis. How should we as a city respond? I'm a fifth-generation Austinite. My family moved here in the late 1800s. My great-grandmother lived most of her life in Cherrywood. On the other side of my family, my grandfather survived Nazi occupation and spoke only Polish when he came here. I have two daughters, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. My primary question, will City Council pass a code next that allows for adequate housing for new people like my ancestors and my children? That's truly what Code Next boils down to. Let me say it again. Will Code Next allow for adequate housing for the future? Further, will it allow for adequate housing for immigrants and refugees? Will it allow for adequate housing for people trying to escape climate change catastrophes like Hurricane Harvey? While Washington ignores our moral imperative to act on climate change, will Austin be there to take up the charge? Now look at version 2.0. That's the consultants have given you is still over 1,000 pages. That's obscene for a city facing a housing crisis. How will these rules help us make it easier to build housing? In fact, 1,000+ pages of bureaucratic hoops will block all but the best funded housing builders. Commissioners, when considering Code Next, look to your core principles. Do you believe we should have an Austin for everyone, or should we maintain the status quo? Should we be a welcoming city, or one stuck in a false memory of how Austin used to be better? There will be many people that will be scared. They're scared to change, but in most cases, they already have a house. Their pleas amount to the pulling up of a ladder for the next generation. What do you want? An Austin that looks to the future, or one stuck in the past? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that concludes our citizen communication. Thank you. And thank you, Chair Oliver, for that excellent suggestion. You're welcome.